Tonight's special guest speaker, Dr. Seabird McKeon, is the director of the American Bird Conservancy's Marine Program. Dr. McKeon's work focuses on biodiversity, natural history, and conservation of marine ecosystems. An avid and enthusiastic conservationist and science communicator, Dr. McKeon has participated in expeditions to remote reaches of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans as he investigated the impacts of environmental challenges on global biodiversity. Tonight, Dr. McKeon will teach us all about seabirds, their importance to maritime cultures, the ecological connections that seabirds have with many very important ecosystems, from mountaintops all the way to coral reefs, as well as efforts to conserve and protect seabird populations globally. Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Seabird McKeon.
Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much to the Florida Oceanographic for serving as host. Conservation is a learned value, right? I think that's something we can all agree. And it's part of why I personally identify so strongly with what Florida Oceanographic does. Your outreach is amazing, and I just cannot be a bigger supporter. So thank you again. Tonight we're going to be talking about seabirds. But we're also going to be talking about humans and human relationship with ocean. So for those of you here with me in reality, in person, could I see the hands of people who have gone sailing or have enjoyed a day out on the water? All of you. For those of you at home, everyone pretty much just raised their hand. That sensation, that perspective is important and is what I'm going to be talking about today. So when we go sailing, the sail fills, the hull lifts, and we fly, right? It is that simple. That sensation of flight is a perspective shared only between humans and seabirds. Think about it, 4 feet above the surface of the water, about 20 miles an hour. What else does that? That's not a dolphin perspective. That's not a sea turtle perspective. That's not a coral reef perspective, that's a seabird perspective. What are seabirds? We have an entire alphabet of seabirds. And these are several groups, not one group, but they're united by their occupancy of the oceans. So we range from A with Aleutian tern all the way to Z with Zeno's petrel. And in the middle we have lots of penguins and pelicans and cormorants and everything else. Tremendous diversity. Diversity in size, so the smallest of them, least storm petrel, could fit comfortably in the palm of your hand. The largest of them, the royal and wandering albatrosses, are human scale. A 12-foot wingspan, an individual royal or great albatross has the capacity as an individual to roam the world. This is the only group of birds, only group of animals on the planet that have the same capacity for individual travel as humans do. We're talking about champions of the bird world across the entire range. So the largest wingspan, as I mentioned, wandering albatross. The longest migration, sooty shearwater. Figure eights across both the Atlantic and the Pacific basins. The longest annual migration, Arctic tern, going from one pole to the other and back. Deepest diver, emperor penguin, at over 1,800 feet deep. Astounding. It just continues. So frigate birds stay aloft for 4 to 5 years before they come to nest. During that time period, they're drinking from clouds, they're sleeping on the wing, they're catching fish, flying fish in the air. Gadfly petrels chase hurricanes. Astounding. It seems to me that awe is an appropriate reaction. And maritime cultures worldwide celebrated and cultivated relationships with seabirds. Think about Vikings, all right? You all know Vikings. Yes, the pillaging is probably going to stay on their permanent record. But they had an incredible relationship with seabirds. So as they're out floating along, discovering the North Atlantic, they had a relationship with eiders. So eider are a beautiful marine duck. And eider happened to have one of the most potent insulators in the form of their down that is known to humans even at this time. So in a world of complex structures, engineered insulation, eider down beats them. And the eider down can be harvested from the nest, where it's gently plucked from her own breast by the female and lines the nest. You can gather some at the beginning of the nesting season and some at the end of the nesting season and develop a collection that can be waterproof and insulating as you explore the North Atlantic. So these ferocious Vikings had this soft spot for eiders, so much so that they built eider nest coves into their rock walls. The Polynesian and Micronesian navigators, the wayfinders of Moana fame, also had a tremendous relationship with seabirds. They would utilize the motion of birds to know where they were in the ocean and where they were going. A tern with a fish in its bill is probably returning to a nest. You know that it's heading to an island somewhere. They knew the migratory routes. They knew long-billed curlew would take you from Hawaii to New Zealand. A remarkable understanding of the natural history and biology of these birds. The Inca Empire was founded, was powered by bird guano. So it was the guano cormorants, largely, but also Peruvian pelican, a few other species, that provided the agricultural resources to create an empire that spanned from the coastline of South America all the way up to the top of the Andes. Seabirds were revered. It was actually death if you set foot on one of the guano bird islands. So one of these places, very important, don't mess with it. And as the European explorers started making their way around the world, this awe, this appreciation of seabirds continued. So how did we find our way? We don't have the exact same stories that we do from Vikings or Inca or the Polynesians as far as the use of seabirds, but we know that they were there. We know that they were logged carefully. They were described for the first time as we move from the 1500s into the 1800s. By the time Cook was making his voyages around the South Pacific, the majority of the seabird strongholds of the world had been found, right? So these are mostly island nesting creatures, and these were an island-seeking people. So Cook's voyages are interactions with island after island after island. And they were remarkable. If you look at some of the journals, if you look at some of the logs, they're filled with illustrations of birds that we know and recognize now. You can see the frigate bird that hangs out here with us in Florida sometimes, right? Petrels, cormorants, everything is visible in the logbooks and appreciated at a detailed level. As we start to leave the golden age of sail into the age of steam, the relationship starts to change. And what was at one point a celebration turns to exploitation and a thought that this limitless abundance was there to be used. And we use them. We use them in great numbers for food resources, for feathers in pillows and mattresses. They thought it was inexhaustible. It wasn't. So by the time we're getting into true steam, there is no kinship idea left, or very little of it. Instead, it's one of commercialization. It's one of exploitation. These are, I know this is a poor photograph, but these are eggs of Laysan albatross on Laysan Island, gathered commercially. So Coleridge, in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, talks about the albatross. The albatross was a sign of good omen. right? We killed the albatross. It happened in real life too. We killed the albatross, and it was a sign of good omen. It was a signal of our relationship with the ocean. And then we forgot. Just out of curiosity, does anyone recognize this beast? I've got one hand in the back of the room. I've got a couple hands. All right. This is Caribbean monk seal. Within the lifetime of some of the people in this room, we've lost an apex marine predator from the North Atlantic. This animal is found even as far north as the Florida Keys, in the Bahamas. 1953 was the last known sighting. Humans forget readily. The baseline shifts. We move away. So this talk is an effort to encourage remembrance and take the opportunity to try to rekindle some of that kinship. As we look around the world's islands, the story of seabird extinction is written in the island names. So Jamaica petrel, no longer with us. St. Helena petrel, no longer with us. Guadalupe storm petrel, gone. Chatham Islands penguin, gone. Labrador duck. It continues. Because as we were moving around the world, exploring, discovering, changing, we were bringing things with us. We were bringing our own impacts. We were bringing new predators, cats, rats, pigs, dogs, new herbivores, goats, donkeys in some cases. We've added climate change to that mix now and sea level rise for some islands. And so this little insular world, this little terrarium environment was no longer safe. What have we lost in the Atlantic basin? All right, what species have we forgotten right here? Jamaica petrel that I just mentioned. Jamaica was the sole nesting area for this species, and we lost it shortly after the introduction of the small Indian mongoose in the late 1800s. Great auk we've lost. Probably did not get down to Florida with any frequency, but North Atlantic. St. Helena's petrel was likely here. Olson's petrel was likely here. And memory has shifted so much that by the 1950s, the 1960s, even our artistic representation of these birds are poorly informed. This is a Wilson storm petrel. It looks a bit like a odd-shaped sandpiper here, yes? Standing on those very spindly legs. This is a bird that does not stand on land. Those remarkable legs are intended to let it walk on water. But we've forgotten. And we moved from forgetting to a point where seabirds are now invisible. We don't think about them. There's no voice acting for seabirds in the same way that there is for your backyard birds. We don't have a bird feeder that we can put out and call in storm petrels. We don't have an opportunity to see most of these birds with any regularity unless you get out on the water, unless you experience some of that human perspective on the ocean. At the same time, the challenges have just increased. So plastics in the oceans are now an increasing problem for the majority of the world's seabirds. Interactions with fisheries, coastal development, introduced predators, ocean energy of all types is having challenges presented for seabirds. It's gotten to the point where we're looking at 70% declines in seabird populations between 1950 and 2010. 70%, and this is after hundreds of years of exploitation. So this is where ABC Marine comes in. The Marine program is based around 3 ideas, and these are the 3 primary ideas I'm going to be talking to you about tonight. One is the creation of safe havens for marine birds, sustainable seascapes, so making sure that we have win-win situations for marine resources for both humans and seabirds. And then the idea of kinship that we started with. How do we increase that visibility? How do we increase connection to human culture and society for seabirds? Let's start at the beginning with safe havens for marine birds. We go out and we try to find the safe places for birds. And if we can't find them in safe places, we create them. How do we do that? We restore islands by moving introduced predators and exotic vegetation. We create conservation fences, so we'll actually fence off large areas. We'll translocate, meaning move a bird from one area where it is not safe to an area where it is safe. And we'll use social attraction, so put out decoys and calls to pull in birds that might be wandering, looking for a place to breed in those safe areas. And okay, so there's a lot of importance about safe. What makes islands unsafe? And it's that human legacy. This is the first video of a rat taking a Galapagos petrel chick from its burrow. It's not gory, I promise, no gore. But you can see, it just removes the chick, takes it away. These birds evolved to nest on isolated islands where there were no predators. They have no defensive capacity. So even birds as large as albatrosses can be taken down, can be eliminated by predators as small as a house mouse. So we create fences, we create areas. Building conservation fences is not an easy job. We need mesh that ends up being fine enough that even the smallest young house mouse can't climb through. Tall enough and shaped well enough that a cat can't go over the top of it. We've just completed one in Molokai, the North Shore, a place called McKeon. And McKeon is remarkable. It's a cliff-top area, and we've already put out Laysan albatross decoys and social attractions, so there are calls echoing. You can go up there and sit with concrete Laysan albatrosses until the real ones arrive. But we're hoping, and we're already seeing signs, we're hoping to get at least 12 species of seabirds back to McKeon. What is wonderful about McKeon is that it's a place not just for seabirds, but also the indigenous vegetation. So this is a coastal strand ecosystem, which has endemic indigenous plants and endemic indigenous, and I'll add endangered, pollinators. So yellow-faced bee, yellow-faced Hawaiian bee, is a group of species, all of which endangered, and at least 2 of them are in McKeon. Closer to home, I hope some of you have had or will have the opportunity to see this bird in your lifetimes. This is black-capped petrel, or diablotine, meaning the little devil. And this is a bird that ranges all along the Florida coast. As soon as you hit the Gulf Stream, you are in black-capped petrel territory. Blackcaps are called diablotine because they have an eerie cry. It's an odd wailing sound. Where were these birds in the North Atlantic? Well, at one point they nested across the entire Eastern Caribbean, ranging from the Bahamas down to the Windward Islands. Now, they're restricted to just the island of Hispaniola, right on the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. I brought up the name for a very specific reason. It's because when we go looking for where these birds might be, where the birds should be, it's hard to find the history if we've passed too many generations of human memory. So we start to look at place names. If you want to find memory of petrels, look for place names with these keywords: witch, devil, spirit, crying, moaning, ghost, wailing. And when we think about the Caribbean, on the island of Dominica, there is a Morne Diablotine. It's named for the petrel, not for the devil. But if you don't know what you're looking for, it's easy to confuse the place names with a petrel past versus a haunted past. A great example of this is in New Zealand, where this wonderful, very difficult for me to pronounce, so I'm not going to try, Maori word at the bottom of the screen. It translates to the Spirit Mountains or the Wailing Mountains. And it was called this because of Cook's petrel nesting in the area. The entire mountain range would ring with their sounds. So for black-cap petrel, for our little devil, we're trying to take not a fence approach, which would be impossible in the conditions presented in Haiti or the Dominican Republic at this moment. But there is a very small islet off the southern tip of the Dominican Republic called Alto Velo. This was the first landmass that Christopher Columbus saw when he approached Hispaniola. And it's called Alto Velo because it resembled the sails of a tall ship. So we're going to try to remove invasive predators and herbivores from the island and repair it in partnership with the Caribbean Ecosystem Partnership Fund, Island Conservation, other groups. And we're going to try to fix this island up for 2 endemic species of lizards and perhaps the Caribbean's largest nesting colony of sooty terns, a bird that we could get to see here in Florida as well. And it's a potential site for the translocation of black-cap petrel. This would be the only safe nesting site. So mainland Hispaniola is a lovely place. They nest up in the pine forests at the tops of the mountains, but it has mongoose, it has rats, it has cats, it has dogs, it has pigs. The threats are many. So the thought is maybe we can move them to this island, and this has been done successfully in the past numerous times with other species of petrel in the same genus. They currently do not have a safe nesting area. This is a pattern we see time and time again. How do we deal with these human-created problems? So this is Galapagos petrel, a close relative. So this is the first generation of Galapagos petrels. This one's only 2 or 3 weeks of age. And we used home-built artificial nests for these birds. But it's the first generation of Galapagos petrels to use these nest cavities that were human-derived. This is Carolina Proaño. She leads the project for us in the Galapagos Islands. She's a fantastic, passionate biologist, excited about what she does, and all 4 petrels. She's conducting this work on agricultural lands. So this is in conjunction with largely dairy pastures, other crop farmers, and she's able to put these nests into the passageways between fields and ensure that the nutrients from the ocean come back to those agricultural fields in a win-win situation. When we think about why petrels nesting on mountaintops might be important, it harkens back to why the Inca found them important. Bird guano is a powerful fertilizer, right? And this has come to pass in Florida as well. In fact, you've probably seen it. If you've been out kayaking or on the water, you'll see these poles with little perches on them. They are literally pelican poles. And pelican poles have been demonstrated. If you can get a bird to come perch on your pelican pole, the seagrass grows faster, the propeller scars heal more quickly. So there's a benefit to seabird guano for nearshore coastal environments. And this, despite the logic behind it being incredibly simple, has been a very difficult thing to study. And it's only within the last 20 years we've been gathering large amounts of data about how this works. Now we know that adding seabird-derived marine nutrients, bird guano, into systems like coral reefs increases the colonization of crustose coral and algae, which is a primary driver of why corals settle on an object. It increases the endosymbiotic zooxanthellae, or the little algae that lives within coral tissues themselves. Coral growth increases in the presence of marine bird nutrients. It doesn't stop there. The stories get more elaborate and more crazy every year. So if we have seabirds nesting in native vegetation, depositing guano into coastal ecosystems, we see increases in both phytoplankton and zooplankton level, which then draw in larger numbers of pelagic planktivores like manta rays. Chains of connections going back to seabirds and seabird populations. If we remove the introduced predators and the introduced herbivores, very similar results. So if we get rid of the rats on an island, we see increased native vegetation growth, increased seabird colonization, healthier reefs, and nearshore coastal fisheries. If we remove the goats, similar situation, better coral reefs through the increased presence of seabirds and seabird nesting. We are detecting positive impacts of seabird restoration even at the lowest levels of seabird populations for 10,000 years. So I ask you, what would the impacts to ecosystem health be with completely restored seabird populations? Our second primary idea of the marine program, ABC, is this idea of sustainable seascapes. How do we make ocean ecosystems work for both humans and birds? And in this field, we're thinking about fisheries, we're thinking about energy, we're thinking about agriculture, development, infrastructure. So fisheries, we've talked a little bit about bycatch. We're going to talk about that. But there are other interesting ways in which human infrastructure and seabirds can get along. One of them is here in Florida. Have any of you walked into a grocery store and noticed that there were terns flying overhead? Perhaps you were struck by a very small fish as it fell from something going overhead. Terns nest, at least terns in particular, nest in relatively large numbers on the flat tar and gravel rooftops that many of our supermarkets use or have used, right? The problem is that because of insurance demands and other situations, those tar and gravel roofs are going out of style. So ABC is working with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to create new either structures or new roofing materials that would allow for seabird nesting. So that as these birds are pushed off the beaches by humans, which is what's happening, we use beaches every day in huge numbers, particularly in this state, we need there to be an alternative habitat, and we need it to be functional and sustainable for both humans and birds. Flat roofs is a great way to go, so we're trying to find solutions. We're doing similar things with tropic birds in the Caribbean. So tropic birds are burrow nesters, but they'll happily take a styrofoam igloo if you put it up. So tropic birds, if you are unfamiliar with them, are exquisitely beautiful marine birds, all white, long tail feathers. They look, quote unquote, angelic. If you hold them in the hand, they are anything but angelic. They will bite you. And they're very good at defending their nests. But these nests could go up on top of hotel roofs with cameras, make sure that people see the marine biodiversity that is coming to them to visit. Again, finding win-win situations. And then there's that idea of fisheries, right? So how do we stop the loss? And a large part of what we do is work with artisanal fishers and regional authorities to bring bycatch under control. And there's a few different ways that we do this. Line weighting, I'll talk about, torii curtains, and marine protected areas. Most of this work is focused on waved albatross. So waved albatross is the only tropical albatross. It has wing and flight adaptations to tropical waters, and it has crazy morphological features as well, including the best eyebrows in the bird world, right? Waved albatross were the last of the large albatrosses to be described, It was because they nest in a very remote area. This is the island of Hispaniola in the Galapagos Islands. And from this island, you can see these are tracks of albatross leaving Hispaniola and going to forage on the western coast of South America. Here it's mostly focused on Ecuador. You see the outline with Peru beneath to the south. So they're traveling from Hispaniola to what we know as the Humboldt Current. And the Humboldt Current is one of the richest fishing areas in the world. And this is a potential source of conflict, right? We know waved albatross get hooked, and they get hooked in artisanal fleets. These are not industrial fishing fleets. These are not commercial fishers. These are fishers who are fishing to feed their family. We need to find win-wins. Because the conflict, when you start mapping out, here the tracks of albatross are in purple. The tracks of these artisanal boats are in multicolors. The fishermen have offered to let us track their boats so that we can get a handle on this problem. These are people who love the birds. These are people who love the ocean and have an intimate relationship with it. They want solutions that work. There's conflict, though, to be sure, and you can see it when you put a GoPro down on a fishing line. So here we've got a variety of birds, shearwaters, boobies, several different types of petrels, going after fish as they're being retrieved. Some of these birds can make it down 60 meters. They're remarkable. The albatrosses generally are not going anywhere near as deep, maybe a meter, but there is a real conflict with birds in this fishery. So what do? We start conversations and we find new tools. So we make sure that fishers are able to report what are the birds that they're seeing, what are the birds that they're encountering, who gets hooked, how often does it happen, when, where. And then we've started to create new tools. One of which is this device called a nursery that you see on that lower photo with the two PVC pipes. Looks a little weird. Let me explain. So as a long line is being placed out, there's a danger zone where the birds can actually dive and catch the baits and become hooked. So that's a danger zone. If we add weights to the line and increase the speed of the line, that zone of danger becomes much smaller. So that's the first thing that we want to do, is add weights and increase the speed. So that two-tube structure that you see is a line shooter for an artisanal long line. So what you're seeing here is hooked lines being deployed out of this 8-meter boat, this 20-foot boat that's going along with its engine open. So instead of taking a half hour to 45 minutes to deploy a long line, here it takes 3 minutes. The birds don't even have time to see this deployment. It reduces bycatch upwards of 95%. Another issue that we have, or another potential solution, is that as those same longliners are going out, the birds continue to dive on those hooks. What do? Well, there is what we call a Tory line, or a bird scaring line, right? So that we can deploy in that same danger zone. So if we put out a line with streamers, birds are very visual. The idea of a scarecrow, it's a visual deterrent. This is a scarecrow at sea. It's just a streamer line out behind the boat, and it works. What we didn't know until recently, because of one gentleman named Giovanni Suarez, who's a former fisher who works with us, he creates these things, and he created Tory curtains for artisanal boats. So you can see in the top video, we've got a whole bunch of shearwaters and petrels hanging out right off this hand-lining boat. They're coming in for the baits. They're coming in to try to intercept those fish as they come aboard, and they'll get right up to the side of the boat. They're within arm's reach, and they get hooked. In this case, one bird gets hooked. You can actually see the bird be treated very gently by the fisher, I'll say, and then tossed back overboard. In the lower video, what does the addition of a simple streamer curtain do? It keeps the birds more than 3 meters away from the lines. These hand lines are dropping right beside the boat. The birds won't come anywhere near them. With a streamer, this costs less than 50 cents to make. Simple tools, informed conversations with the people that it's impacting. And the last thing we're trying to do is really increase the visibility and the pride, not just in the birds of this special region of the world, but of the people as well. Because they face shared threats. Coastal development, industrial fishing, they're not impacting just the birds, they're also impacting the local people. And so this kinship can be fostered, can be educated, and instead of competition. Which brings me to the last idea that I want to talk about with you, which is that kinship concept that we started with. So how do we increase the connections to human culture and activity? How do we find seabird ambassadors? I'm looking at all of you. When I think about this, I have to deal with that idea of human memory. Who could potentially be seabird ambassadors? Who remembers the kinship? Where can that shared perspective still be found? Fishers. Fishers are a great start. Fishers already are using marine birds as indicators. They're using them as fish finders. So much so that modern marine radar often has a button labeled bird mode. So you can push bird mode on your boat's radar, and it'll tell you where the seabirds are, right? If this is not a Ducks Unlimited style conservation win, I do not know what is. This is a fantastic need for kinship between fishers and marine birds. So I'm working my hardest to get sport fishers involved, get them on board as ambassadors. Who else can we go after? The poets and the songwriters, they remember. If we look at song lyrics just over the last decade, last 2 decades, last 3 decades, there's references to seabirds, there's references to the ocean. There is a real memory there. When we think about visual artists, they remember too. There are seabirds in almost every painting you will ever see of a tall ship. Seabirds are so common in visual art that they've become almost shorthand for motion, shorthand for standing in for sound, standing in for some of the other senses, standing in for loneliness. They take on some of the aspects of the human relationship with ocean, standing in for perspective. And then the last group is you, right? So who remembers and enjoys that perspective? You do. If you're a surfer, if you're a sailor, if you're a mariner, if you're an islander, your interaction with the ocean is similar to a seabird's. You can see it in this foil surfer and this pelican. They are doing the exact same thing, right? They are riding waves a few feet above the surface, that effortless grace, that same linking, unifying sensation. So how do you get involved? What am I asking for here? I need you to talk. I need you to tell stories. If you are a young person, I need you to go out and explore and see. If you are a birder, fantastic. Get on board a boat and go see what you can. Go enjoy the world's oceans, see amazing birds, and then tell the story. If you're on a ferry and you see the birds, tell the story to your neighbor. If you have an enjoyable interaction with a pelican loafing on your dock, tell the story. They need voices, and they have no voice at this moment. So I am looking for ambassadors. Happy to take cash too, but your voice is what I really want. You standing up for seabirds and seabird conservation. Just not last week, 2 weeks ago, this is up in Fort Pierce. So we had this tremendous aggregation of seabirds. We've got Forster's terns, we've got Bonaparte's gulls, we've got pelicans, we had northern loons at that point, all feeding in this rip right at the inlet, right? And as you panned across the scene, we had fishers standing at the end of the jetty, and on the other side of the jetty, using the exact same wind in the same joyous manner, were wingers and kite surfers and windsurfers. Everyone was out. It was remarkable. And I wonder how many of them were even considering, oh, my wing, my kite, my foil are based on the designs that were handed down to us by seabirds to sailors and going forward. Probably not many. We need that message to be spread. We need that ethos that this is a shared perspective to be handed on. And so that's part of what we're doing. We have a marvelous cohort of people working with us right now, one of whom, Emmy Koch, she runs a all-girls surf program where she teaches filmmaking, she teaches surfing, she teaches about environmental awareness, inclusive of birds. This is a remarkable program and one of many, many ways that this can happen. There are still remarkable places out there to see birds. There are remarkable places, a few left, where the ocean looks like it should. The ocean should be alive. When was the last time you saw that? This is what it was at one point. These places still exist. There's still opportunity. So I'm going to leave you with one last story. I got invited to go to the valley of Nuololokai in Hawaii. And Nuololokai is a special place. It is an ancient Hawaiian village that is in the process of being not restored, but maintained in its current status by the Nepali Coast Ohana, or family group. And the Ohana, this community, invited us to come out because while the restoration of the anthropological and architectural features of Nuololokai are stepping forward time after time after time, they knew that their ancestors and their family of the past had this marvelous relationship with seabirds. So they were looking for bird restoration as well. So we got a chance to go out and visit, and it's incredible. It's this towering cliff. It's just titanic, coral reef in front, and this little nestled valley where this village was. As you walk along the cliff wall, you could find old nests of barn owl where they had taken Hawaiian storm petrel. It's just amazing. As we went out, or as the day ended, we went out to the rocks to watch the sunset. I mean, spectacular Hawaiian sunset. Who's not going to do that? And so we're out there looking, and off in the distance, you could see this cloud. And it was like, oh, we're in for bad weather? No. When you put up your binoculars, the cloud was birds. The clouds were seabirds that were coming in from the ocean looking for a safe place to nest. That night, we were able to sit with the Ohana, with the community that belongs to that place. and look through night vision scopes and goggles at the clouds of seabirds circling above us. They don't nest there yet, but they can. If the will is there, these birds can come back. And though Hannah was moved by the idea that these birds that they called the birds of starlight, something that they had never seen, had a chance for restoration. And so there's opportunity. There's opportunity across the world. There's opportunity in many, many ways. And we are really looking forward to your help as ambassadors. Because when we lose seabirds, we lose not only the ecosystem restoration tools that I've talked about, that bird guano, environmental monitoring, they tell us the story of the ocean as it is now, but also our most direct connection to that ocean, to that shared perspective. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much. I'll direct you, if you are interested in what we're doing and would like to learn more, I've put out a sign-up sheet at the back, right beside Zach's. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Yes, sir. So he has asked, I might consider speaking to the West Palm Beach Fishing Club. And I don't know about them, but I would love to get their information. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other questions? Yes, sir. So it's a challenge. Right now, oh, sorry. Thank you, Zach. He said that I brought up the slide of wind turbines, and he asked, are there any good studies about the impacts of wind energy on seabirds? Is that correct, sir? Is that? And the answer is that it's very challenging. We certainly know for terrestrial birds that there are impacts. We are working on developing models. We're working on developing systems that can actually stop turbines. Everybody wants sustainable energy. Everybody is pro-wind, but we need to do it right, and that means doing it slowly. So we are working on the studies to make sure that there are estimates and that we're going forward in a cautious and as expedient manner as possible. It's also true, though, that every other form of energy in the ocean, oil extraction, gas extraction, are also problematic for birds. So I don't want to solo out wind and renewables here. There are just energy problems for marine birds. Any other questions? Yes, please.
So you said that you moved the birds from the islands with the predators to ones that have fewer.
Yes.
How do you move them?
Okay. So she asked, or she said that I said that I moved birds from islands with predators to areas without predators. And she asked, how do I move them? So it is a long procedure, and so it ends up being there's a right time to take a baby bird from its nest when it is grown enough that it'll handle the trip well, but not so grown that it is locked in on that one area, right? So it's very much a situation like sea turtle nests, where they know the beach that they came from. Seabirds do the same thing, or many seabirds do the same thing, in that where that chick steps out of its burrow for the first time and looks up at the stars, these are birds of starlight, remember, that's where it's going to come back to. So we need to make sure that the timing is right. They get extensive amounts of fish smoothies. So you can imagine a blender with a very carefully calculated recipe of this fish, this squid, these nutrients, these vitamins that gets fed to them. They're weighed and measured. Every caution is taken. Many of them end up with a helicopter ride because we want the trip to be as quick as possible. There are no bumpy trips for these birds. They are well taken care of.
Let's grab a couple of Zoom questions. So one of our viewers is wondering what the gray material was that was being painted on the outside of the nesting igloos that you were making.
So that's concrete. So that's a quick drying concrete. You can take a styrofoam half sphere and make an igloo out of it by adding a weak mixture of concrete. Sometimes you throw in some gravel and some sticks as well, just to make it seem more attractive to the shopping tropic birds. But we're trying to make a structure that is both sturdy and lightweight, and that seems to be the mix.
Great. Another one of our Zoom viewers mentions that the cruise ship industry seems like a potential ally to educate the public on seabirds. Are they at all involved in any of your conservation efforts?
Not yet, but I've got my eye on them.
All right, I've got one more. It's a little bit of a longer one, part question, part story. As a native Hawaiian, I appreciated all the references to conservation in our beautiful state. As a mainlander, how can I support some of my seabirds who come to Laguna Lake Park in Fullerton on the west coast of California? I'm working on a research paper as a student. I'm also wondering if the predators are humanely removed. I'm concerned with people who chase these birds away. As a songwriter, I love writing about them too and weaving their presence into my music.
Complex question. Okay, so by all means, I encourage this person to reach out. We can talk about many of these things, but I will address that humane removal of many of these introduced mammals is not possible. It is responsible and humane in the fact that mortality is always quick and as painless as possible. But we are talking about the death of many rats, many mice, and other mammals. It is also essential. We cannot leave any, if we wish, for these bird populations to recover. There's a population rebound of mouse is within a matter of 2 years. So you can go from hundreds of thousands to 6, and it'll fail. Your project will fail because the mice will be back. Yes, sir.
Recently in New Zealand, I went to Zealandia. Can you explain to people here what that is about, and are there any more conservancies or like that around the world?
So he said that he had recently been on a trip to New Zealand and saw Zealandia, and he asked for any more examples. I am unfamiliar with Zealandia itself as a project, but I'm anticipating that it is a whole ecosystem recovery project, as the Kiwis are so good at doing. Is that true?
Yes, their objective is actually a 500-year goal to eliminate all of the predators of birds in this sanctuary. And they were in the opportunity to fence what was formerly a reservoir. And the reservoir was, the dam was in danger of collapsing, so they drained it partially. So all of the land around the reservoir was conserved with this fence, and they are now in the process of trying to eradicate all the mammals. And the process is radical in that they have actually, they tout the number of possums, rats, and other mammals that they are killing to restore this massive reservoir to its original state.
So he has explained an extensive project in New Zealand where they are fencing an area, a large area, and looking for to turn the clock back 500 years, which in New Zealand would mean the removal of all terrestrial mammals. There were no mammals in New Zealand. And so when humans arrived to New Zealand, all humans, it was a bird paradise. It was habitated by a large group of species called moas, which were akin to ostriches, if bigger. a giant eagle that hunted those moas, and a tremendously diverse avifauna. The Maori, upon discovering New Zealand themselves, had rich cultural traditions that they have maintained, focused on these birds for hundreds of years. And so that ethos of the Maori has come back to become a part of the country of New Zealand's approach to rewilding, restoration, and conservation for New Zealand. Yes, you had another question.
Okay, so when we were on Dry Tortugas, they have all the rat traps everywhere, right?
Yes.
Is the poison that they're putting out going to affect the birds? Like, because you have to kill them, right, with the poison.
So the question is about the poison used for eradications, specifically with regards to the Dry Tortugas. So any species that is considered threatened by the poison is removed. So they will be held safely until that operation is concluded, and then they'll be put back. So the fact that you were seeing traps out at the same time that an effort was ongoing means that there were no species that would be negatively impacted by that presence. Dry Tortugas had a successful eradication 2 years ago that I'm aware of. And so my guess is that when you saw traps out in the Dry Tortugas, it was to maintain that rat-free island status, which will be a boon for every species that comes to the Dry Tortugas. Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever been to the Galapagos Islands?
She asks, have I ever been to the Galapagos? Yes, I've had the pleasure of going to the Galapagos, and it is everything you have ever heard. It's amazing. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the guano can help the health of the seagrasses and coral reefs. Does the effects of the guano vary depending on the type of species of seabird?
So he asked a very interesting question about, do the effects of the guano vary on the recovery of seagrass or coral reefs based on the type of bird that's producing it? And the answer is we don't know. This is a whole field that is really just beginning to be understood. And you can imagine that tracing anything from one trophic level or one tier of the ecosystem to the next is a challenging task. So we're just getting to these questions at this point. We have numerous scientists working on this right now. I hope to have a question, or I hope to have an answer to this question in the next few years, but right now, I couldn't tell you. Yes, ma'am.
So, I was thinking, rats can burrow. Couldn't they go under that fence or even climb above it?
All right, great question about conservation fences. She says, rats can burrow. Why can't they just go under it or climb it? The fence is built with about 3 feet of the mesh extending into the ground. You didn't get to see a completed fence, but I'll happily show you after. But they arc over, so they're unclimbable by rats and cats and other climbing predators.
We have another Zoom question. What was the name of the bird that flew aloft for 4 years, and how's that physically possible? Could you describe in more detail how they do that and how they sleep particularly?
So that's frigate-birds. Frigate-birds are a group of seabirds, and they don't use the surface of the ocean in the same way that other marine birds do. They fly. They are the consummate aerialists. So these birds have, and many seabird groups have a locking tendon, which will allow them to maintain their wing posture while they're asleep. They also pull a little bit of the dolphin trick, we think, in that they put part of their brain to sleep, and the other part is piloting. But they are actively sleeping on the wing, and they don't want to touch the water. They will occasionally come down and sleep on the rigging of a ship. But for the most part, those first 4 years of their life is in the air.
All right, folks, any other questions for Dr. McKeon? Oh, I see one more.
How common is it for seabirds to nest on ships? Not common. In fact, most of these birds are very specialized nesters. They have either a specific island they're going to, a specific area that they're going to. These are not generalists, these are specialists. And for something to be happy on board a human construction of any type that's generally a generalist trick, right? So we have had some success with conservation stories of building specialized nest boxes or structures for them. The closest I've ever seen to a ship are houses built for kittiwakes, with a small type of marine gull, that were built by the wind industry. They said, we've got a kittiwake problem, we're gonna build a kittiwake condominium, and they had the money to execute it. So they were able to build a specialized structure for kittiwake nesting. But that's the closest I've come. If you happen to be a marine engineer and you want to explore on how to make floating structures appropriate for nesting seabirds, you will have my full attention.
Oh, we got one more Zoom question that popped up. What's the lifespan of a frigate bird?
Lifespan of a frigate bird. I'm about 15 to 20 years, which is not, even as long as that is not all that long for a seabird. Most of you might have heard of Wisdom. Wisdom is a Laysan albatross, currently nesting in Hawaii. She is 74 plus years old and has a chick this year. Every year, yeah, that's applause worthy. Every year she goes out, faces the risks, faces the chance of being caught in fisheries, interacting with any number of problematic situations. She braves the gauntlet and has come back year after year for at least 74 years since she was banded.
Oh, I see some more hands popping up. Great.
Quick comment about cruise ships. Flying birds do not land on a cruise ship. But if you're on a cruise ship, you can often see flashing birds bow right, as I like to call it. The bow of the ship will disturb flying fish, and then they will go after those flying fish. And that's a very learned behavior that you can very readily see on a lot of your cruise ships.
So for those of you who couldn't hear it, he was describing very well the behavior of some marine birds catching flying fish that flush from the bow of cruise ships. So frequently the boobies, some of the diving marine birds will ride effortlessly. They'll surf the aerial wake of the ship and watch for those flying fish to launch themselves out of harm's way into harm's way. Yes, sir, in the back. Okay, so Indian River, nocturnal bird making a lot of noise. This is a random guess, but I'm going to guess, and you can get back with me and tell me if I'm right or not. Take a look at night herons. So night herons are short, stocky, largely nocturnal herons that, as they get up in the evening to start their commute to wherever they're going to feed, they do tend to make a little bit of a racket. So I would check out, and we have two here. We've got yellow-crowned night heron and black-crowned night heron. Either are possible. Sure. Yes, sir.
On the beach, what are the kinds of birds that like to go running in and out of the water?
The kinds of birds on the beach that go running in and out of the water. All right, so we've got a bunch of different birds that do that, that'll run along the edge, but probably the most common here are what are called sanderling. So sanderling are a small type of sandpiper. They actually nest in the high Arctic and are just with us for the winter. So we will see sanderling during the winter, and then they are launching all the way up to Alaska, Arctic Canada, a long flight. So when they are running in between the waves. They are foraging hard. They are looking for every calorie that they can possibly ingest because they have a long trip ahead of them.
All right, see, I've got a good question from Zoom to wrap up with. In your opinion, what's the most endangered seabird today, and is there hope for that bird's future?
Wow. There's always hope, right? There are many. There are many that are down to a handful. One of them is a frigate bird that lives off of an island, or on an island off the coast of Brazil. It's called the Trindade frigate bird. We know that there are 16 individuals. There are some, though, where we're not even sure if they're still with us. And so these are birds that nest in very hard places to get to, where you have to search. They're the birds of starlight. Many of them come in under dark, leave under dark. So how do you find something that is largely invisible and very, very rare? But I will say, as far as hope goes, the hope lies in talks like this. The hope lies in recruiting ambassadors to talk about seabirds, to spread the word of the conservation needs, to engage with the ocean on that very shared perspective. And in doing that, we'll promote seabird conservation in a meaningful way. And I want to thank you again for all of your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Test. Thank you so much, C. What an incredible way to wrap up our lecture series, folks. And I want to thank each and every one of you. This series is truly for you and by you. We wouldn't be able to have speakers like Dr. McKeon come to visit us and give these presentations if it weren't for your enthusiasm, your incredible questions. I mean, these turn into almost like a panel discussion towards the end. The Q&A sessions are my favorite part of the lecture series, and I know our speakers really appreciate the thoughtful questions that you have. As we say goodbye for another 10 months, I do want to let you know that Florida Oceanographic Society is a lot more than the Coastal Lecture Series. Some of you only interact with our organization during this short period of the year, and I'd like you to change that. So please, if your only interaction with Florida Oceanographic Society is through the Coastal Lecture Series, come out and visit us at the Coastal Center. Check out our website. Look at our advocacy webpage. Figure out what you can do to be a bigger part of the work that FOS is doing to help our community and to help our environment. If you have any questions at all, you can reach out to me directly. Most of you have my email. It's on our website. We'd love to see more of you. And I know we'll see you again in 8 months, but hopefully I'll see you sooner than that. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for a great season. Good night, everyone on Zoom. Take care.